Lowe's knows how to help make your home holiday ready for less. Get Select Style Selections vinyl flooring for just $1.99 per square foot and have it installed before the festivities begin. Our team can help you every step of the way. See a Lowe's Red Vest associate or visit Lowes.com/holiday install to get started. Lowe's, we help, you save. Basic install only. Date restrictions apply. Subject to availability. Installed by independent contractors. See associate for details. Contiguous U.S. only.
Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Greetings, everybody. This is Krish Dhanam filling in for my dear friend Todd Huff on the Todd Huff Show, the home of conservative, not bitter. Todd is taking a much-deserved break, so I, along with a few other guest hosts, are going to fill in for a couple of the shows, and I've been slated to do two of them, so bear with me as we do two different topics. At least that's my goal, because this is being recorded in studio in Dallas, Texas, after which I'll head off to do my other sojourn. And so to that end, just sit back, relax, and hopefully you'll send us your queries through the Todd Huff Radio Show communication capabilities that they provide. If you want to reach out to me, my name again is Krish Dhanam. My email is krish@patriotacademy.com, krish@patriotacademy.com. And that is the new endeavor that we've been on since the last time we were together. I know the show itself has increased in the number of listeners and the number of markets it is now available. So as always, it is a distinct pleasure and an honor to be asked by Todd to fill in. And every time I get the email, I jump right on it, because even though I don't have an affinity for this, I'm a teacher by nature. So we'll try to get you some thoughts and some ideas in a concise form so that we have some fun in our three segments today and in the next episode when I'll be featured again. Today I want to talk about humor and humility, some of the things that seem to be lacking from all of our leaders on all sides of the aisle. Obviously, since we were last together, America went through a great reset in November of last year, when we had the greatest political comeback in the victory of our current president, Donald J. Trump. I myself had done early voting and left the country not realizing what country I would come back to. We were on the heels of being pushed up against the wall, and many things happened. And so after I early voted and went away to India with bated breath, we awaited the results while I was in India. And true to form, the last time President Trump won unexpectedly was also in 2016, when I was in India in the same city at the same time. So in talking about humor and humility, I want to take you through something called the leader's pulse. If you are conservative, not bitter, that's why you're listening to this show. We're all about ideas that allow us to engage appropriately, endeavor succinctly, but more importantly, because we follow a moral law and a moral lawgiver, we want to encourage compassionately. So I'll talk about some of the tenets of a leader's pulse that I hope that those that are conservative and are serving in office in various capacities will listen to this and get some ideas. But for the humor side of it, when I was a child, we had some of these nonsensical poems that we found fancy. Of course, I grew up in rural India, so the access to things that were Western were much more limited. This was before the internet era. So as a result of it, anything that caught our fancy in those days stayed with us. We memorized it to the best of our ability because we didn't have download capabilities, etc. The joy of artificial intelligence and the ability to search the length and breadth of the internet and the blogospheres has created for me a new joy where I can go back and rediscover some of these things. Today I want to share with you one such humorous poem, and then we'll get on to the business at hand of dissecting a leader's pulse and the importance of a leader having a good pulse in this modern tumultuous climate. So the poem goes this way. One fine day in the middle of the night is how it's titled. So right off the bat, you know that it's going to deal with some idiosyncrasies that are at diametric opposites. And the reason I'm going to share this with you is a lot of our political dialogue seems to be like this. Opposite ends of the spectrum never meeting, completely randomly made up, two sides going at it with neither side ceding anything and nobody understanding what's going on. So here's how that poem goes. One fine day in the middle of the night. Ladies and gentlemen, skinny and stout, I'll tell you a tale I know nothing about. The admission is free, so pay at the door. Now pull up a chair and sit on the floor. One fine day in the middle of the night, two dead boys got up to fight. Back to back, they faced each other, drew their swords and shot each other. A blind man came to watch fair play. A mute man came to shout hooray. A deaf policeman heard the noise and came to stop these two dead boys. He lived on the corner in the middle of the block in a two-story house on a vacant lot. A man with no legs came walking by and kicked the lawman in his thigh. He crashed through a wall without making a sound into a dry creek bed and suddenly drowned. The long black hearse came to cart him away, but he ran for his life and is still gone today. I watched from the corner of the big round table, the only eyewitness to facts of my fable. But if you doubt my lies are true, just ask the blind man, he saw it too. Of course, this is credited to Anonymous, and as a result, we'll leave it at that. Every time I read that, every time I dissect those words, I think that that's where we are. Blind men watching something that's a fight and asking to recant our testimony even though we saw nothing. And again, don't read more into it. That was just a humorous anecdote. And as a result of that, that's where I find myself when I look at the leaders of today and their political dialogue. For example, yesterday in the Senate, I think they had a couple of people grilling RFK Jr., who is the head of the Health and Human Services, about his decisions to either gut some of the programs or eliminate some of the others. But the screeching and the hollering that went on was absolutely insane. These were all people on the same side of the aisle at one time. And the moment one person decided to do something that he felt his conscience was asking him to do, RFK Jr. was always someone who was anti-vaccines and all of the things, and his own family seems to have turned against him. But even his colleagues on his side of the aisle, when he sat on their side of the aisle, they were all buddy-buddy. The moment he crossed the aisle, suddenly he has become the enemy. This is no different than the scientists who provide data of God's cosmic creation, and suddenly they go from very renowned astronomers with great credits and credentials to their names and their advanced degrees that were handed out by these universities. And the moment these people decide to go and provide their findings to someone like Ken Ham at Answers in Genesis, suddenly their scientific evidence is no longer valid. The same scientific evidence that once was heralded by them is now suddenly the opposite of everything they believe in. So that's how that poem sounds when you look at, two dead men getting up to fight and all of that. It's like opposites are clashing every single day. And somehow you and I, the connoisseur, the common man, is supposed to make sense of this mayhem. Well, the leader's pulse, something I practice. Now, since we last talked, I've taken on an assignment of being the dean and provost. Those just sound fancy academic titles we had to give. But considering I never went to school in America except to teach, I guess it is appropriate that someone like me who never went to school here would be called the dean of an institute. What is my moral charge? Patriot Academy is an organization. You can check it out online. But Patriot Academy's founder, Todd, has had him on the show as well before. But they gave me a moral charge. They said, we're going to bring you young kids who are between the ages of 18 and 22. Some of them will be homeschooled. Some of them will have come from other environments. But our goal is for you to teach them biblical citizenship, American history, moral philosophy, apologetics, worldviews, and put them through some Socratic methods of debating and rhetoric so that they are able to understand their own argument, because not only have they studied what they believe, they have now decided to unpack and study what the others believe. This seems to be the problem we are having. This seems to be the problem with our current political leaders. Nobody wants to study what they disagree with. F.W. Borum, a prolific writer, said if you want to believe that the world is a beautiful and a wonderful place to be in, you would do anything to buy the books you would shun, and you would shun the books you would buy. What he was simply saying is that if you're a Christian, it may not be a bad idea to study what other worldviews are teaching. If you truly believe what your Lord has taught you, if I truly believe what my Holy Writ tells me, then I have to also go in it with the belief that God's word will not return void. And if I study any of these other worldviews, it just puts me in a Socratic position to be able to debate with a questioning mindset. That's what a leader's pulse is. We need to understand what the other side is arguing about before we jump. Otherwise, we have these screeching matches or these screaming matches in Congress where each person is trying to up themselves and make sure that their soundbite is heard. When a Bernie Sanders, who's an independent, supposedly senator from Vermont, gets on and says, "Oh, what are you saying? Are we all corrupt since we have all taken money?" Well, you said it, and it's now a soundbite. You're asking a rhetorical question. The answer should be known to you before you asked it. Have you taken money from pharma? Is that the reason you want certain things out there and certain things not? Lobbyists have been there in political spectrum for the beginning of time. So as we dissect some of these things, I'm going to give you a formula. It's going to take a different trajectory than a traditional radio show. But then that's what I do. I'm a teacher. I teach young kids some of the art of this debate and some of the ideas that they need to engage in. First is posture. If you want to influence through humility and have the power of patient persuasion, what is humility? Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking less often of yourself, said Fred Smith. Fred Smith was a leader's leader. Man, I was talking to a friend of mine this morning at breakfast, and I said, if I want to go through my life and have something written as my epitaph on my gravestone, it would be what was written of Fred Smith. He stretched others. He stretched others. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking less often of yourself. So the first thing in posture, the foundation of humble leadership. True influence begins with the leader's inward posture before God and others. You know, one of the things I'm really perplexed about when I look at the current crop of politicians on both sides, again, don't get me wrong, I know this is conservative, not bitter, and we're supposed to tout our conservative cause, and I do. I'm a diehard, flag-waving, gung-ho, dyed-in-the-wool Republican. But before that, I'm probably conservative, and before that, I'm probably really grateful as an immigrant to have studied the charters that made this nation as great as it is. To this, I want people to understand something. There is something about surrendering to God, that inward posture of humility that begins with that godly edict, that conscience that pricks you in the morning saying, today, when you go out and open your mouth, as you represent your constituents, as you stand there in front of the glaring cameras getting your 15 seconds of fame, are you doing it so that you would be viral? Are you doing that so that you would be victorious? Or are you doing that so that you would be righteous? In the sense that someone has given you their ability by voting for you, and you represent their rights and their sacred honor in this fight. So the first thing is that true influence. John Maxwell, leadership luminary, said, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. He also added that every individual in this world will directly or indirectly influence 10,000 people. Can you imagine the catastrophe that we are creating when some of the people who are out there in positions of influence spew such utter garbage? They have no leg to stand on and yet try to dance. They don't have a single dog in the fight, so to speak, but they are getting rich on their own. I'm a migrant to this country, and when I look at some of the people who are first-generation migrants to the United States standing in Congress, touting their own cause, talking about how great their allegiance is to Somalia, how great their allegiance is to Palestine, or whatever their root cause is. It makes my blood boil. I came from India. I still go back to India. I'm still a taxpayer in India. I travel back and forth. I love my homeland. I just was there about a week and a half ago, and I can't wait to get back. I've made many trips to my homeland. But nothing can take away the pride I have for the country I now live in. Think about it. That humility, the foundation of humble leadership. I remember one time I was speaking at a conference in India and the American flag had been inadvertently hung upside down. Nobody there knew about flag etiquette. It was just some poor kid didn't know which side the flag was and he put it upside down. Now, whatever your decision is, I decided, and this was in New Delhi, India. I said, I'm not going to go in and speak till someone comes and rectifies this because right now I'm a representative of the United States of America because that's the country in which I have citizenship. It doesn't take away from my love for my land or my respect and homage to my parents and my ancestors there who taught me a lot. But that inward posturing, where do you begin? What is your cause célèbre? What is your non-negotiable? How can you have the audacity or the temerity to stand up in front of a microphone and say my first allegiance is to another country while you're drawing a check in this country as a member of the United States Congress? And then to go on and lie about your net worth and others, it all is because there is no inward posturing towards God. There is no conscience that pricks them that says, don't say that. That is not right because one day there will be a final judgment. And when you stand in that final judgment, you're going to be held in error. See, true influence, that inward posture has to have three components to it for a leader to truly shine. First, they have to have a surrendered spirit, yielding control to others above your personal ambition. Yielding control to others above your personal ambition. A surrendered spirit. What does that look like? That looks like a total commitment to those you represent. So when your own constituents barrage your phone or light up your lines in your office or inundate you with email saying, hey, these are my concerns. I recently watched a town hall in Chicago where the mayor over there was in confrontation with someone who said, listen, you've got a deficit here because you're pandering to the wrong tune. Now, I'm a first-generation migrant, and we may have disagreements on the whole immigration issue and birthright citizenship and all of those other things. And I don't know where my own status will be down the road. For now, I'm a United States citizen, and, I cherish the fact that I'm part of that. But I also understand that this is a privilege. Getting a visa to come to this country, if you think it's a right, then if it's refused, that's the right of the refusal. But if you think it's a privilege, then you have to honor that privilege. So when you say that I'm going to take $1 billion out of my state budget or out of my city budget and give it to people who broke the law, then a law-abiding citizen has a right to call you on the carpet and ask you that question. And if you look at them with anything other than a surrendered spirit, what you're doing is actually blaspheming yourself. Because the God, the great I am, is not sitting in the sky saying, oops, the mayor of Chicago made an oopsie. No, that's not how that works. That's just ridiculous. Second is a servant's heart. A servant's heart is leading by serving others, not exalting self. Being so proud of some of your accomplishments, and this is a weird thing, conceit seems to plague everybody on both sides of the political aisle. My mentor, Mr. Ziegler, used to say conceit is a weird disease that affects everybody except the person who has it. And a chip on one shoulder is just indication of wood up above. Without a servant's heart, you have these blockhead arguments. The 2080 issue that Scott Jennings talks about on CNN, and I think he's the next rising star of sanity that we've got on the conservative side. But think about it. If there's crime in a neighborhood and you want the crime cleaned up, and just because you don't like the person who is authorizing the cleanup, you now say, wait a minute, I don't think that you have the right to do that. The question is not about the right to clean up crime. The question is, do we need to clean up crime? Is that a right? We want our birthright to be able to kill people, but we don't want our living right to be able to eliminate those that are killing other people. This is ridiculous because we have strayed so far away from this Bible. And a selfless mindset, man, nothing makes my blood boil more than when I see the net worth of these people in Congress who every day have the audacity to stand in front of those microphones and say, oh, I just earn $175,000 a year before taxes, and, I'm just a simple person, and I was a bartender, and I was this, and I was that. But somehow in a collective, with all the people affiliated to you, your brothers, your siblings, your uncles, your aunts, suddenly your net worth has gone from nothing, from $50,000 to $30 million. And you have the audacity to tell me there's nothing wrong there, and there's nothing, it passes the sniff test, and I'm just a bigot, or I just am jealous, or the best answer I love of all. Anytime you question anybody on one side of the aisle, they'll say, well, let's not focus so much on what I'm doing. Let's focus on what the Trump administration is doing. And we're no saints on our side, because we will always blame the other side. But that's how it's always been. But posturing, true posturing, the foundation of humble leadership, will never allow you to succeed, will never allow you to elevate yourself to a Ronald Reagan stature, unless you have that surrendered spirit, unless you have that servant's heart, unless you have that selfless mindset. George Washington, the first president of the United States, he modeled humility by resigning from power twice when he could have kept it. His servant leadership helped shape a republic built on character and restraint. What did he say when he surrendered or when he resigned as the commander of the Continental Army after the Revolutionary War had been won? He said, I would be no different from anybody else. I would be no different than the very king we tried to overthrow, or we have overthrown, if I stay in power just because I'm able. Of him, the King of England said, either that man was absolutely crazy, or that was the greatest man who ever lived. That's true leadership. That's the founder of the country, who later on his second time as well, after 2 terms in office, walked away. No greater advocate for term limits, or at least term common sense. Don't get me started on that, as Dennis Miller would say, or I'd go off on a rant. But I've been in the corporate space for a long time, and I think this is very, very interesting. In the corporate world, you will outlive your usefulness if you mess up once or twice. Third time, definitely you're on the move. Today, we have people who have been in Congress for 40 and 45 years, whose net worth has gone from $150,000 to $200 to $300 million. And they have the audacity to tell me that I'm not in touch. They have the audacity to tell me that I don't have the will or the view of the American people on my side. This is not leadership, folks. Remember, we're talking about the leader's pulse. This is your humble host, Krish Dhanam, filling in for my dear friend Todd Huff on the Todd Huff radio program, the home of conservative, not bitter. When we come back on the other side of the break, we'll talk about patience as a combination. Well, welcome back to the Todd Huff Show, the home of conservative, not bitter. This is your guest host, Krish Dhanam, filling in for my dear friend Todd Huff. It's always a joy to be a part of Todd's audience. I know he's worked long and hard to build it, and it's always exciting to see the growth that the show has had and the reach the program continues to have. The fact that he has asked me back multiple times means in some small way he must approve of what I'm doing, though I'm pretty sure I couldn't do it every day. And every so often, I guess it's fun to just sit back and opine wholeheartedly about some topic or subject. Today, we were talking about the leader's pulse. In the last segment, we talked about posture, the foundation of humble leadership. And we went through 3 components of how we need to have a surrendered spirit, a servant's heart, and a selfless mindset. We probably touched on a few illustrations, and I think I left some of the names out there. And I'm pretty sure that as you're listening, if you're a connoisseur and a consumer of political facts and political ideologies and commentaries, and you're as much a addict to it as I am, you probably will have figured out who I was referencing when I was talking about foreigners who come and take citizenship of this country and an oath of allegiance to this country, and then get the chance to serve in the United States Congress and follow in the legendary footsteps of people who shaped this amazing nation, and then bring with it their diatribes and their little complaints and their little games. It's almost a laughing stock when I look at the lack of dignity when these people are screeching at each other just because they don't get their way. What a childish bunch of antics it is to play and scream as if you are truly for the common man or the common woman. The fact that you can infuse into your own thought process something as simple as common sense tells me more than I need to know. Well, in this second component, I want to introduce you to the attribute of patience, the discipline of lasting influence. If posture is the foundation of a humble leadership, patience is the discipline of lasting influence. Now, I've been a denizen of this country for going on 40 years. I came here as a migrant from India with $9 to my name in 1986. Since then, I've had the privilege of working for a few private sector companies, and the most important tenure was starting with the legendary Zig Ziglar, the late great motivational icon and quintessential genius, as a telemarketer in 1991 circa, and then eventually becoming his vice president of global operations. Through that journey, I was introduced to many titans of both the faith and business, industry and sports. He took me on some of the biggest stages in the country with the likes of Colin Powell and Rudy Giuliani, former First Lady Laura Bush and others, sports powerhouses, you name it. As a young immigrant, I could not even believe that that was the dream I was getting to live. And there was about a 3.5 year period where it was just him and me on a private jet. And as I look back at that time, I think of the patience I had to develop because I was in the presence of greatness. And being in the presence of greatness, I need to realize that I had a discipline I had to adhere to, that when my time came, and only when my time came, would I try to step out from the shadows and shine. Which is a problem which we have today. Everybody wants their moment in the sun and everybody wants it now. So we have 25-year-olds who are just elected who think that their identity and their cause celeb and all of the stuff that goes with their XYZ gen nomenclature is as statuesquely important as those that have truly been battle tested. I cannot imagine if somebody like Congressman Sam Johnson, who had served in Vietnam and had all that character around him. I just remember when I would go to hear him speak, you would just be in awe saying that's what a hero looks like. Now we have these children, so to speak. And I'm 63 years of age, so anybody who's 30 years of age qualifies to be my kid. And I see the antics they play. Even if you look at any of these man on the street interviews, the absolute audacity they have to question things that are global in nature, that have a historic significance, whatever it is. They just think that clinging on to a piece of paper or a poster and donning a Middle Eastern garb of some kind and masking your face because apparently you don't want to be recognized, and then yelling slogans qualifies you for normalcy. No, that's insanity. Especially if someone walks up to them and says, hey, it's a Wednesday afternoon, what do you do for a living? And they erupt. Isn't that a legitimate question? I thought protests took place on the weekend for people who truly wanted the economy to prosper and were worried that everything in this world seems to be a threat to democracy when the very beauty of this nation is it's a republic. Anyhow, enough said on that side. Here's the patience components that I want to introduce, and hopefully I'll ask other people to listen to this when it's put in the form of a podcast or something, because aside from a radio program, it could also be a good leadership lecture unto itself. These are some of the things I teach my students at the Patriot Institute, which is part of Patriot Academy in Fredericksburg, Texas. Enduring leadership is not rushed, but refined through restraint, wisdom, and timing. First is waiting with wisdom. Waiting with wisdom. How come these folks are so quick to react and so slow to respond? And there's a difference. You go to a doctor and you need medicine, and he gives you the medicine, and you come back a week later and he says your body is reacting. That's a negative. He says your body is responding. That's a positive. So throughout human history, response has been positive and proactive. Reactive nature has not been good. It's always been knee-jerk. Responding, not reacting, very vital. And the third is persisting in peace, staying consistent and faithful in doing good. How come we have gone from I want to serve my constituents to now suddenly everybody is racist who doesn't vote for me? Every redistricting measure, if it's good for one side, is not good for the other side. If it is engineered so that you would get into power, somehow that is just. If it is engineered so that you're out of power, somehow that is unjust. And don't even get me started with some of the camouflage that we are seeing where people are trying to pander to become something they are not just so that they would garner these votes or they would garner this image, like as if, for example, in Hollywood right now, the identity issue is a big thing. Almost every celebrity there has a child who's got an identity issue of some kind. And as a result of it, it's almost like they're trotting out a new designer bag. And having a child who is confused or going through some kind of an issue, parading them around is somehow your way of saying, I understand humanity. Suddenly people who read a script, who get millions of dollars to do it, whose only claim to fame is that they can act like somebody else and do it well, mind you. It's obviously a talent and that they get recognized for it. But they are now the voices of reason. These are the people we're supposed to listen to, who get up with shrill microphone and say that, you know what, I haven't done a day's work in my life that's honest because all I do is act out someone else's identity. And I'm going to, this is so far from lasting influence and patience. I was once asked the question, what's the difference between success and fame? I said, Madonna has one, Mother Teresa has the other. Fame is what these people want as their lasting influence. You look at them at 60 and 65, my age, I know that they have been out there performing for 40 years, but somehow they think that wearing less clothes the older you get is the only way you can stay relevant. No, that is not wisdom, that is foolishness. Wisdom is the correct use of knowledge. We have more knowledge right now than at any other time in human history, and the largest percentage of educated derelicts messing up the planet. I wonder what my late mentor, Mr. Ziegler, would say. He would be heartbroken if he saw the world that we now live in. The cacophony that we see out there that goes for common sense dialogue. Any town hall you see begins to erupt into chants and shouts because none of them wants to wait with wisdom. Give other people a chance to speak. Let them get their complete thought across. Don't try to cancel them before they speak. This is the world we are in. And persisting, staying consistent and faithful in doing good. A great example is William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce. His decade-long campaign to end the slave trade exemplifies perseverance and the quiet strength of patient influence. That great change only came when he was on his deathbed, which means here was a man who labored for something all of his life and never got to see the fruits of it except when he was ready to check out. But his legacy is cemented forever because he is considered the champion of that process. When we come back after this next break and hit our closing segment for this, our first day of filling in for Todd, I'll talk real quick about persuasion, the fruit of Christ-like influence. We need a lot more persuasive people in this world. We need to have that posturing and that patience, but that persuasion, the ability to convince. This is Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, contentious on the floor, disagreeing on many of the pivotal issues of their time, but still conveniently capable to sit, shake hands, and break bread. When we come back after this break, we'll hit the closing stretch. Until then, this is Krish Dhanam filling in for Todd Huff on the home of Conservative, Not Bitter. Welcome back to our final segment of the Todd Huff Radio Show, Conservative Not Bitter. This is Krish Dhanam filling in for Todd Huff as a guest host today and hopefully tomorrow. I don't know when the second episode will air, but we'll do that as a separate so that there is no crossover. We've talked today about posturing. We've talked about patience. I want to really quickly take you through something called persuasion, the fruit of Christ-like influence. You know, many years ago, I had the privilege of traipsing through India to the city of Ahmedabad in India, which is where Mahatma Gandhi, the architect of the only bloodless revolution, which was India's independence against the mighty British Empire, lived. I mean, Gandhi lived there for the latter part of his life. He was known as Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma was the word meaning great soul that was given to him by Mountbatten. Now, Mahatma Gandhi obviously was a Hindu gentleman and a Hindu philosopher, so what does he have to do with Christ-like influence? I'd like to hearken to the words of another of India's great, Rabindranath Tagore, who won a Nobel Prize for his literary masterpiece called Gitanjali, one of India's great literary giants. He was also the author who created or at least framed India's national anthem. Now, here is a literary giant, Nobel laureate, and describing the great soul, the father of modern India. He said, he had that spirit of meekness, of self-sacrifice, of simplicity, and of love for man, not merely the love of those who love us, but the love of those who hate us and those whom we hate. He had what is called the Christ spirit. And I'm paraphrasing. Rabindranath Tagore, in quoting about Mahatma Gandhi, said he had a childlike quality, he had a decisiveness that was contagious, he had a persuasiveness that was incredible, but most importantly, he had the quality that we call the Christ spirit. And I find that fascinating that when one predominantly great Hindu man described another predominantly great Hindu man, they used the adjective Christ. An adjective. And the reason I bring that is America is a Judeo-Christian nation that was birthed in the Christian identity, that was built on a Christian identity. And I teach America's biblical citizenship now. And you can look at all of the founding documents and you will see that out of the 56 men who signed the Declaration, I think 47 had a direct church affiliation. Many of them were deists, many of them were theists, many of them were Congregationalists. They may have disagreed on doctrine, they may have disagreed on disposition, but all of them believed in a creator God and an almighty. And even Benjamin Franklin, when he asked the people to take a recess, and some of these things, are easily found if you go to wallbuilders.org or do any amount of research, you'll find that they had a fervor. Even Ben Franklin in his autobiography as writes about how to his son that when he received the first money, he says, today we received our first fruit. Now for a man who was a deist, which means he had a belief in the supernatural, but he probably did not believe in what the Christian exposition was at that time. Probably the most well-read man in the colony. I don't think a preacher could have kept his attention. He was so brilliant. But he calling his first earnings the first fruit tells me that they had an inkling of faith, and that inkling of faith was biblical in nature. If you go back to the very declaration that was signed in France, where Benjamin Franklin was one of the emissaries in 1783, along with John Jay and John Adams, I think the title of that doctrine itself says, under the guise or supervision of the Most High Triune God. So we come from that biblical background. Going forward, that's my humble request from those of you who are listening. Make sure that your persuasion shows the fruit of Christ-like influence. And I call this the leader's pulse for the simple reason that whatever our posturing, whatever our pandering and all of that is concerned, if we want to lead, we should also be good followers. That was Christ-like. His humility was shown in the upper room. When he wanted to unleash on the world something that 12 people would take forward that would change the course and the direction for the next 2,000 years, the first thing he did was he ungirded himself and he washed their feet. In that episode, it doesn't talk about his feet being washed, which means he was the lowliest of the lowliest. Even in servant class in that time, in Hebraic tradition, there were two kinds of slaves. One kind were the kind who would wash the feet, and the other kind were the kind who just were part of being happy that you had a taskmaster and you were a bond servant. which means the person who washed feet was lower than anybody, even in slave categories. The fact that our Lord did this for his disciples shows us that we need to do something in the days ahead. Now remember, this is the home of conservative, not bitter, so hopefully I'm giving you ideas that are from the category of not bitter. I hope you will stay with us when I come back for another episode. Be in tune for that. I'm going to take you through the process of how we can be humble and how through our humility we can actually participate in what the good Lord gave us as the great commandment. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That doesn't mean we compromise on principles. That just means we stay humble to the process. Again, this is Krish Dhanam filling in for Todd Huff on the home of conservative, not bitter. We'll see you down the road. Blessings.